In the year 2147, humanity thought it understood dragons, towering creatures of fire and steel. But deep inside the research dome of Arcadia 7, a discovery shattered every expectation. A hatchling unlike any ever seen, scales glowing like starlight, eyes filled not with fury but with warmth. And instead of fire, he reached out with tiny arms and embraced everyone he met. What could this mean for the fragile peace between worlds? And why were entire fleets arriving to claim him? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. Arcadia 7 woke before the sun, the glass dome blushing with early light and distant cloud. At the south airlock, Dr. Leona Marsh pressed her hand to the scanner and listened to the door hum like a big, polite bee. She had walked this corridor 1,000 times, but today felt different, as if the floor itself had quietly taken a breath. "Morning, Doc," said Omar Reed from the monitoring deck. His coffee steamed like a tiny comet. "Our celebrity hatchling has been up since 4. He tried to hug the cleaning drone again." The drone froze and beeped for backup. Leona smiled. "We may need to teach the drone consent." She crossed into Nursery Dome 4, where soft lamps gave the sand a warm glow. Inside the transparent enclosure sat a dragon no taller than her hip. He was sapphire blue with darker flecks, eyes like tide pools, wings still a little clumsy. When he saw her, he squeaked, a sound like 2 notes finding each other, and opened his arms. "Good morning, Soul," Leona whispered. No one remembered why she had said soul the first day. It simply fit, like sunlight found in a pocket. Soul reached her, wrapped his small forelimbs around her waist, and rested his head against her coat. He was warm, not burning hot, more like the first day of spring. His scales gave off a dim, cheerful shimmer, a shy ripple of light that Omar had named the glad glow. The reading charts never got tired of it. Leona had studied draconians for a decade. Most were proud and formal, soft voices and hard rules. They breathed plasma that could slice steel and melt rock. Soul, however, preferred hugs, soft chirps, and holding hands. He did not make smoke, sparks, or any of the usual signs. Tests said he had the organs for fire. His heart said he had other plans. "Breakfast?" she asked. Soul nodded and tapped the panel, choosing mashed fruit and mineral broth. He ate neatly, then offered Leona a spoonful she absolutely did not need. It took it anyway and nodded like it was a 5-star meal. Soul squeaked, pleased. Omar's voice came through the intercom. "Heads up, Doc. We have visitors." Leona turned as the inner door opened. Director Ruth Albright entered with a tall man whose suit looked new enough to creak. His expression was smooth, like a lake before a storm. "Dr. Marsh," said Ruth, "this is Miles Hart, Liaison for Interspecies Affairs." "Dr. Marsh," Miles said, nodding, "I'm here about the child." "His name is Soul," Leona said gently. "Then I'm here about Soul." Miles set a small projector on the counter. A violet seal spun in the air. "The Draconian High Council has lodged a formal request. They state that a hatchling found adrift is property of the nearest clan. They want him transferred immediately." Soul leaned into Leona's leg. His glow dulled. She put a hand on his shoulder. "With respect," she said, "Soul is not property. He is a person, and he has lived here for 92 days. Our own treaties allow us to claim care after 90. Miles did not flinch. Exemptions apply when the High Council issues a sacred child notice. "Sacred what?" Omar whispered into the mic, forgetting it was live. Ruth shot him a look, then faced Miles. "We can't just hand over a child and call it diplomacy." Miles folded his hands. "I prefer the word peace." Silence thinned the room. Sol watched the grown-ups, trying to measure something he could not name. He took Leona's hand and squeezed. She squeezed back twice, their quiet code for "I'm with you." The floor shivered. Alarms slid from blue to amber. The dome ceiling dimmed to gold as external shutters prepared to seal. Omar's voice came fast, clipped. Incoming. 3 signatures. Draconian make. No request to land. Correction. A courtesy notice. They intend to set down on our deck. Roof stared upward as a shape crossed the dome like a moving mountain. They brought ships? Miles exhaled. They brought a decision. Through the glass, Leona could see them. Sleek vessels that seemed to swim through the air, hulls catching dawn and turning it into quiet fire. They drifted down without a sound and settled on the platform like great, patient birds. Sol's glow flickered. He pressed closer still, head tucked under Leona's coat, small claws curling at the fabric. Leona held him, her voice soft. "It's okay, little star. I'm here." Omar whispered as if the ships could hear him. "Doc." They did not come to talk. They came to collect. Leona looked at the door, where new footsteps would appear any second. She felt the cold line of fear and the warm line of purpose cross inside her, and she chose the warm line. "If they came for a child," she said, "they will have to meet." The inner lock cycled. The air went very still, and Arcadia 7 held its breath. The visitors entered with stately calm. 2 crimson guards stepped first, tall enough to shade the ceiling when they unfolded their wings. Behind them moved a dragon with scales that shifted from amethyst to deep sea, her eyes bright as a winter night. When she spoke, the sound carried dignity and moonlight. "I am Selene of the Twilight Crest," she said. "We come for the hatchling called Sol." Sol hid behind Leona's leg, peeking out with one bright eye. His glow, once gentle, had gone nearly invisible. Leona kept a hand on his shoulder. "He is afraid," she said softly, "and he is loved. Please speak kindly." Selene's gaze rested on Sol, then on Leona. "You speak for him as kin. I care for him," Leona said. "I will keep doing so unless he chooses otherwise." Miles cleared his throat. "Matriarch Selene, Director Albright, Dr. Marsh, let us remember the law. The Council asserts a sacred child claim." Selene's head inclined. "The claim is true." She stepped closer, lowering herself to reduce the height difference until her great eyes were almost level with Leona's. "Among our people there are stories, old as cooled stone. Once in a long while a hatchling is born without the furnace of flame. Instead, they hold a softer power. We call it the gentle light. It does not destroy, it mends." Leona felt Sol steady a little, as if the words were a small bridge. "Your child," Selene said, "shows the signs. He reaches instead of roars. He soothes instead of scorches. We thought the line ended." Her voice thinned with wonder. "And here he is." Director Albright crossed her arms. "And your plan, matriarch? Raise him far away? Press old lessons on a young heart?" Selene's eyes softened. "My plan is to listen to him. To you." She looked at Sol again and spoke to him, not about him. "Little one, may I greet you?" Sol hesitated. Leona knelt, bringing her face close to his. "You choose," she whispered. "I'm here either way." Sol stepped forward, slow as rain. When he reached Selene, he reached up with small arms and touched the ridge of her muzzle. Selene closed her eyes. A sound rose from her chest, not a growl, more like a purr woven from stones and streams. Sol did what Sol always did. He hugged her. Dakor shifted, half alarmed, half moved, then looked at the ceiling very intently, possibly to hide misting eyes. Miles stared, as if a spreadsheet had just burst into song. Ruth's lips pressed together, but the corners tried to lift. Celine drew back, voice hushed. The gentle light is real. Miles regained his footing. Be that as it may, jurisdiction. Stop, Ruth said. We are not haggling a child like cargo. Celine folded her wings. We could remove him. We have power, and some among us would demand it. She paused. But power is not guidance. I came to offer a different path. She turned to Leona. Shared care. 3 months among your people, 3 months among mine. You, Dr. Marsh, remain a constant. Leona blinked. That is new. So is he, Celine said. Miles began counting obstacles. Treaties, liability, security, precedent, public reaction, press. We will write new pages, Celine replied. We will sign what has not yet been drafted. Omar whispered into the line. I can make a spreadsheet for the hugs. Leona tried not to laugh. She rested a hand over her heart to steady the surprising swell of hope. Saul, she asked, what do you want? Saul looked from Leona to Celine, then to the guards, then back to Leona. He pointed at his chest with one small claw, then at Leona's coat, then at Celine's muzzle. Then he hugged himself and nodded. It was clear enough. Both, Leona said, her voice a little rough. He wants both. Miles rubbed his forehead. I can already hear the committee sighs from orbit. A deeper hum rolled through the dome. A new shadow fell across the glass. Even the guards looked up. Celine's pupils narrowed. The Archon. The largest ship had arrived without sound, as if it had always been there, and only now decided to be seen. Its hull bore old marks, etched with lines that looked like rivers. Leona felt the hair on her arms rise. The inner doors parted again. A dragon entered who seemed carved from dusk and embers. Not as large as a warlord, yet the room changed shape around him. His eyes held long memory. He stopped a respectful distance away. I am Kadrin, he said. I heard a rumor my people had found a story. Sol stared up, unsure, then made a tiny 2-note sound. The Archon's gaze rested on Leona's hand where it still held Sol's shoulder. You care for him, he said. ... I do, Leona answered. And he trusts you. Kadrin lowered his head until his voice came like wind in tall grass. Little one, I have been told you do not burn. Many will call that lack. I wonder if it is a gift. Sol blinked, then lifted his arms in the universal request to be picked up. Every human in the room stopped breathing. Every dragon's wing twitched with ancient caution. Kadrin hesitated, studying his own claws, then gently scooped the hatchling against his chest. Sol settled in, purring like a tiny engine. The Archon let out a breath that seemed to make the air warmer. Not afraid, he murmured. Leona felt the tight knot in her ribs unwind a few turns. Celine's expression softened to pride and relief. Kadrin looked around the room. We will not rip a bridge from its first stones, he said at last. We accept the sharing you offered, Matriarch Celine. We will craft the law to hold it. Miles blinked twice. That was faster than my best meeting. When a story is ready, Kadrin said, paper learns to run. He handed Sol back to Leona with care. Tend the light, Dr. Marsh. We will too. And so the vow was made. Not with seals and stamps first, but with a hatchling's trust and a room that learned to breathe again. The first season of sharing felt like learning to walk on a bridge still being built. During the human months, Sol played in classrooms under the dome, listened to music, and visited the clinic where he insisted on hugging every nurse. During the draconian months, he studied histories, learned sky etiquette, and was taught how to fold his wings so elders wouldn't trip. Leona moved with him, a quiet thread tying spaces together. Change showed up in small ways. Guards who once stood like statues began telling jokes. Engineers cooked extra and brought simple meals to the night shift. The dome, once echoing with worry, learned the sound of gentle laugh. One afternoon, while Leona and Celine observed from a balcony, Sol stood in the courtyard with a group of children. 2 human, 1 young draconian named Tass, and a soft-furred alien from the Centauri belt who preferred to clap with all 4 hands. Sol's chest flickered, then a soft warmth poured out like liquid dawn. The air tasted of fresh bread and new rain. The children smiled without meaning to. An old technician who had not slept well in months suddenly remembered the joke he had been trying to recall. Even the plants seemed to point their leaves toward the glow. Celine whispered, "The gentle light." Leona nodded. "He will need to rest after." And he did, curling under Leona's coat like he used to when he was smaller. Not everyone welcomed the new way. One winter, a radical human cell took a draconian prism from a museum, an object not of power, but of memory. Dragons called it a sky echo. It held patterns from old home winds. The theft opened old wounds. Fleets warmed engines. Miles arrived with a stack of warnings. If this breaks, we could lose 10 years of progress in 10 minutes. Leona looked at sleeping Sol. Then we cannot let it break. Before dawn, Sol slipped out with Tass and a security drone that kept whispering, "This trip is not in my job list." They followed a street-level whisper network to a warehouse by the river. People already lined the sidewalks, drawn by rumor and the odd, peaceful courage of a small dragon walking without guards, his glow steady as a heartbeat. The door opened. Inside stood Mara Jensen, shoulders held like armor. Her hands shook, but she kept them still by force. "Go home," she said. "We have our reasons." Sol sat cross-legged on the threshold. "I want to hear them," he said in a small, even voice. Mara laughed, but there was no joy in it. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Sol replied. "I'm new at many things." She spoke of jobs lost, of change arriving too fast, of a cousin hurt during an early contact riot, of a fear that never seemed to leave. As she spoke, the words roughened with truth instead of polish. Sol listened the way water listens to stone. "I am sorry," he said when she ran out. "Pain is a heavy coat. Sometimes people think fire will burn it off, but fire also burns the skin under it." Mara's eyes were wet. "We just wanted something back, something that proved this land is still ours." Sol tilted his head. "The prism is proof of someone else's home. Maybe it can be our mirror. We both miss old songs." Silence wove through the room. Then Tass, who had been quietly fidgeting with a spare bolt, said, "We brought snacks." The moment cracked. 2 of the radicals laughed, surprised to find they still could. Sol stood and lifted his arms. "May I?" Mara stared at him. "You're ridiculous." "Often," Sol said, "but the embrace helps." She dropped the pretense before the rifle. She set it down like it had grown too heavy to lift. Then she stepped forward and let herself be held. It was not magic. It was simply the feeling of not standing alone with a burden. She cried into his shoulder. Tass cried because she cried. The drone cried because its audio sensors peaked and it thought that meant tears. By evening, the prism was back in the museum with a handwritten note. "We were wrong. We are sorry." Cameras caught Sol yawning at a press microphone and asking if the city might consider more benches for tired feet. The question trended for a week. After that day, people started using Sol's name to mean something practical. "Try it the Sol way," someone would say in a meeting when voices rose. It meant pause, ask, listen, and if possible, share a snack. Archon Kadrin, visited to see the prism, returned. He watched a playback of the warehouse doorway, and turned to Leona. "You teach him well." Leona shook her head. "He teaches us." "Perhaps so," Kadrin said, "but every lamp still needs a window to shine through." As seasons turned, Sol's glow deepened, not brighter in force, but wider in reach. Unity halls opened in city centers, circles with soft seats and good tea where anyone could speak and be heard. Draconian guardians took turns at the doors, not to keep people out, but to welcome them in. And the bridge kept growing, plank by plank, kindness by kindness, across a river that once looked too wide to cross. The first time the Veilborn arrived, the sky changed color. Instruments flickered. Radios hummed in keys no one had written. The visitors were beings of patterned energy, drifting like slow auroras. Nothing made for touch could hold them. Soldiers reached for switches. Old fear stirred, the kind with long roots. Leona, older now, sat beside Sol in the resonance lab. "What do you do when you cannot hug?" she asked. Sol watched the new waves cross the glass. "Maybe I learn a new kind of arms." With singers, physicists, and 2 patient violinists, Sol practiced tones that matched the Veilborn pulses. Days blurred. His glow stayed low, saved for focus. At last, he found a thread. When the Veilborn entered a shielded chamber, he did not step forward. He sang. The notes felt like circles finding their centers. The chamber filled with moving light, not bright, not loud, simply certain. The Veilborn answered in spirals of color that tasted like peppermint and rain. A greeting, a yes. The crisis calmed. New rules were written, resonance hours, quiet zones, bridges lit by sound. A joy almost like relief rippled through the alliance. Years went the way years do. Sol stood taller now, though he still bent to meet children eye to eye. He spoke 12 languages, but kept his words simple, like stepping stones any foot could use. He helped open more unity halls. He visited hospitals and shipyards, courtrooms and playgrounds. He fell in easy love with a silver-winged dragon named Lyra, who breathed a thin, bright flame that could light candles without sparing toddlers. They made a soft promise under lanterns and a sky full of curious birds. Leona's hair turned winter white. Her hands kept their steady shape. One spring, when flowers pressed themselves against the glass like cheerful faces. She grew tired in a way that rest could not cure. Sol tucked one wing around her chair and read reports out loud in a silly voice. She laughed and told him to be brave in the right way, which sometimes meant admitting he could not do everything. "I'm scared," she said one night. "Me too," he answered, "but I will be here until here ends." 3 days later, Leona's breathing softened, then quieted. Sol stayed with her, wings sheltering her like a small, warm tent. When she was gone, he let himself cry where everyone could see. People learned that tears do not break a hero. They water what the hero loves. He named the foundation after her, the Marsh, trust for listening and light. Through it, young mediators trained in many kinds of embrace, arms, words, music, patient silence. Sol mentored a new brood of strange and wonderful children who did not fit the old forms. One little dragon, scales shifting rose and gold, tried to breathe fire and produced tiny flowers of light that fell like confetti. Her nickname became Petal Wing, to her obvious delight. "They say I'm wrong," Petal Wing told Sol one afternoon, small voice wobbly. "They are using an old map," Sol said. "You are a new place." He opened his wings. "Want directions?" She ran into his hug so fast they both tumbled laughing. On the 100th day of the first Unity Hall, the plaza filled with beings from many skies. There were speeches, songs, 3 environmental conferences, and roundtables, and a quiet moment where everyone stood still and listened to the city breathe. A sculpture was not Saul alone, and not Leona alone, but the two of them sitting side by side, a book between them, his wing around her shoulders. The base read, in small letters meant for people who leaned in close, "A good world is made by listening hearts." Saul kept traveling. He met miners who worked quiet miracles under stone, and elders who knew jokes older than the docks. He met a baker who made bread that tasted like reunion. He learned to fix a sink badly and laughed about it for a week. When he felt heavy, he visited the garden outside the old dome. The benches there were new because the city had listened. One evening he sat with Petalwing and 3 children, 1 human, 1 draconian, and 1 Veilborn who hummed when happy. "Tell us a story," the human child said. Saul nodded. He drew his wings in, making a soft shelter. The garden lights blinked on. "Once," he said, "there was a small dragon who did not catch the spark everyone expected. He could have believed he was missing something. Instead, he found he was carrying something else." "What?" asked Petalwing, eyes bright. "A lantern," Soul said. "Not for seeing alone, but for seeing together." He told them about Arcadia 7, but with different details, so the old story became a new path. He told them about Celine, who chose listening over orders, and about Cadron, who held a tiny life as if it were the first sunrise. He told them about a warehouse by the river, a prism returned, and a city that built more benches. He told them about songs for friends who have no hands, and about a scientist who taught a dragon that love is the brave way to be exact. The Veilborn child pulsed soft colors. And the ending? Soul smiled. There are many. Today's ending is simple. The world is still learning, and so are we. But our home is wider than it was. It can fit new chairs. Petalwing breathed by instinct. Tiny flowers of light drifted into the twilight like little wishes. The children reached for them and laughed when the petals melted into warm air. Soul looked toward the sculpture in the plaza and felt the familiar ache that comes with gratitude. He did not try to hide it. He pressed his palm over his heart and for a moment let the gentle light open like a door. The garden seemed to lean closer. Strangers smiled at one another as if they had practiced all their lives. Then the glow faded, as it should, and the night resumed its quiet work. Soul tucked the children in under his wings for a while longer. He thought of Leona and of every person he had chosen to build instead of burn. He thought of the first time a small blue hatchling reached for a white coat and found a home. The story could have ended right there, but it did not end. It changed shape, as living stories do, and made space for whoever needed a place to stand. And if you were there, yes, you would have felt it too. That gentle, steady certainty that difference is not a problem to solve. It is the path to something kinder. And that is the promise Saul kept, again and again until the day others kept it without being asked. And then, without fanfare, the world simply kept going. Together.